It was a bright morning at the White House when President Donald Trump received an unusual letter. The letter wasn't from a world leader nor from a senator. It was from a group of Navy sailors stationed at a small coastal base. They had invited him to share a simple Navy meal with them away from the grandeur of state dinners. At first, Trump chuckled at the idea. "Me trying Navy food? That'll be interesting," he said with a smirk. But beneath the humor, he felt something stirring. He thought about the men and women who serve tirelessly, often eating quickly prepared meals in tough conditions. Trump turned to Melania and said, "If I'm going to understand them better, maybe I should eat what they eat." And with that, he decided he would accept. No cameras, no spectacle, just a meal with sailors. Little did he know this humble decision would bring both laughter and tears to everyone present. Word spread quickly across the Navy base. The president was coming, not for a speech, not for a review, but for dinner. The sailors couldn't believe it. "Is he really going to eat MREs with us?" asked Petty Officer Sarah Lopez, a young woman whose husband was deployed overseas. Chief Johnson, a grizzled veteran nearing retirement, chuckled. "Well, we'll see if he can handle Navy chow." The mess hall buzzed with excitement as cooks debated which meal to serve. Some suggested the infamous mystery meat stew, while others wanted to showcase something better. Finally, they decided Trump would eat the same thing everyone else did that evening. Macaroni, a side of beans, and a packaged dessert. Simple, honest. As the day approached, sailors polished the hall, not to impress, but out of pride. For once, it wasn't about formality. It was about sharing a piece of their daily life with the commander-in-chief. The day came. The base was spotless, flags waving proudly in the ocean breeze. When Trump's motorcade arrived, the sailors lined up, not stiffly, but warmly, curious about what was to come. Trump stepped out, shaking hands, smiling more casually than he usually did in public. He walked into the mess hall where the smell of baked macaroni filled the air. "So, this is it?" Trump asked with playful curiosity. "This is what fuels the strongest Navy in the world." Laughter broke out among the sailors, easing the tension. Melania stood quietly by his side, offering her graceful smile. Trump sat at one of the long tables, flanked by sailors young and old. "I don't want any special plate. Give me what you're eating," he insisted. And so, a tray was placed before him, the same as everyone else's. The room hushed. Would he really take the first bite? Trump picked up his fork and examined the macaroni like a critic about to judge a five-star meal. "All right," he said. "Here goes nothing." He scooped a bite and put it in his mouth. For a moment, his face remained unreadable. The sailors leaned forward, waiting for his reaction. Then Trump coughed slightly and said, "Well, that's definitely food." The entire hall erupted in laughter. Even Melania covered her mouth to hide a smile. "It's not Trump Tower steak, that's for sure," he added. But instead of pushing the tray away, he kept eating. Bite after bite, he nodded. "You know what? It's not bad. It's honest food. It tastes like teamwork." The sailors were stunned, not by his humor, but by the way he kept going. They had expected him to quit after one spoonful, but he didn't. For the first time, it felt like the commander-in-chief was one of them. As the meal went on, Trump didn't dominate the room with speeches. Instead, he listened. Young sailors shared their stories, some about missing home, others about why they joined. Sarah Lopez spoke about her husband who hadn't seen his daughter's first steps. Chief Johnson spoke of serving during Desert Storm and the friends he'd lost. Trump put his fork down, visibly moved. "You all carry a burden most people don't even see," he said softly. "And here I am, eating what you eat, realizing this tray is more than food. It's sacrifice." The sailors grew quiet, touched by his words. It wasn't about the taste anymore. It was about recognition. A simple tray of macaroni had become a symbol of understanding. Trump raised his cup of water and said, "To all of you, the real strength of America." Glasses clinked, and for a moment, the room felt like family. The meal wasn't over yet. Out came the packaged dessert, a dense chocolate brownie, the kind that could survive months in storage. Trump picked it up, turned it around, and squinted. "This looks suspicious," he joked, making the sailors laugh again. He took a small bite and froze dramatically. Folks, this might be the sweetest thing I've ever eaten. More laughter filled the room. A young sailor leaned in and said, "Sir, that brownie is older than my car." Trump laughed so hard he nearly spilled his water. For once, it wasn't a staged laugh for cameras. It was genuine, contagious. Even the stern Chief Johnson cracked a smile. That brownie, stale and ordinary, had managed to break every barrier in the room. In that moment, laughter echoed louder than formality. Nobody saw Trump, the politician. They saw Trump, the man, sitting with them, sharing their food, and finding joy in the simplest bite. As the laughter settled, Chief Johnson stood up and handed Trump a folded letter. "Sir, this isn't from me. It's from a friend who never made it home." Trump unfolded the paper, his eyes scanning the faded handwriting. It was a letter from a sailor written decades ago during Vietnam, describing his dreams of one day having dinner with a president, not in luxury, but in the mess hall, shoulder to shoulder. The sailor never made it back. The room grew silent. Trump, usually quick with words, paused for a long moment. His voice broke slightly as he said, "Tonight, I think we honored that dream." Melania placed a hand gently on his arm, and the sailors bowed their heads. For the first time that evening, tears glistened in the eyes of hardened men and women. What began as a simple meal had turned into a tribute. Not wanting the night to end in sorrow, Trump cleared his throat and said, "All right, I've got to ask. Who here actually likes this macaroni?" Hands shot up and the room burst into laughter again. Sarah Lopez grinned. "It grows on you, sir. Or maybe we just get used to it." Trump smirked. "Well, if I can survive it tonight, maybe I'm tougher than I thought." The sailors roared. Humor had returned, but now with a deeper bond. Trump was no longer the distant commander-in-chief. He was part of the table, sharing laughter, sharing loss, and sharing resilience. The moral was unspoken, but clear. Sometimes connection is built not through speeches or policies, but through sitting down, breaking bread or macaroni and truly listening. The night wasn't over, but the sailors knew they would remember it for the rest of their lives. After the laughter, a young sailor named Daniel raised his hand shyly. "Mr. President," he began, "I joined the Navy because I didn't believe in myself. I thought I was too weak, too ordinary. But out here, I found strength I never knew I had." His voice trembled, and the room grew quiet. Trump leaned forward, giving him full attention. "Daniel, let me tell you something," he said firmly. "The strongest people aren't the ones who never doubt themselves. They're the ones who fight through doubt anyway. You're exactly where you're supposed to be." Daniel's eyes filled with tears, and the sailors around him clapped his back in support. For Daniel, that moment was life-changing. Not because the president praised him, but because he finally believed it himself. Trump's words carried the weight of recognition. He wasn't speaking as a politician. He was speaking as a man who understood struggle. During the meal, Sarah Lopez's phone buzzed quietly on the table. She glanced at it, then froze. It was a video call from her husband deployed overseas. "Answer it," Trump encouraged softly. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the call and the face of a tired but smiling sailor appeared. "Honey," he said, surprised to see the president sitting beside her. Trump leaned into the camera. "She's doing a great job here. You should be proud." The deployed husband laughed nervously. "Sir, yes, sir." Everyone in the hall erupted in cheers and claps. For Sarah, it was more than a surprise. It was a memory she would treasure forever. Trump then looked at the sailors and said, "Behind every one of you is someone waiting, someone sacrificing, too. Tonight, I honor them as much as I honor you." That small act turned a simple dinner into a shared family reunion across oceans. The meal carried on, and a rookie sailor named Mark couldn't resist adding some humor. "Sir," he said, grinning, "if you like this macaroni, wait until you try our mystery meat Wednesday. Even the rats turn it down." The room exploded in laughter, and even Trump doubled over. "Mriat, huh? Sounds like it could be a secret weapon," he replied. The young sailor felt proud. He had made the president laugh. Moments like that reminded everyone that laughter was survival. In an environment filled with stress and separation, humor was the glue that held them together. Trump nodded at Mark and said, "Keep that sense of humor. It'll carry you farther than strength alone." The rookie beamed, realizing that in that mess hall, every voice mattered, even his. The laughter didn't just lighten the air. It stitched everyone closer, proving that joy could exist even in the simplest, hardest places. As the meal neared its end, Chief Johnson disappeared for a moment and returned carrying a small folded Navy flag. He placed it on the table in front of Trump. "Sir, this flag flew with us during a difficult mission. We lost good people that day. We wanted you to have it, not as a symbol of politics, but as a reminder of who we are." Trump stood visibly moved and placed his hand over the flag. "This isn't mine," he said quietly. "This belongs to every family who gave everything. I'll take it with me. Not for me, but for them." The room fell into deep silence. Melania's eyes glistened, and even the toughest sailors looked down to hide their emotions. It wasn't the grandeur of the Oval Office, or the power of speeches that defined this moment. It was humility. A flag, folded and worn, had become the heart of the evening. After the flag presentation, one elderly sailor in attendance, retired Captain Harris, raised his voice. "Sir, I've eaten Navy meals for 30 years, but tonight, it feels different because you chose to be here." His voice cracked as he continued, "I lost brothers who never came home. We used to joke about one day eating with a president. None of us thought it would happen." Trump stepped toward him and shook his hand firmly. "Captain, tonight they're here with us. Every bite, every laugh, every tear, it's theirs, too." The captain's lips quivered, and the room broke into applause. For many of the sailors, the meal had turned into something bigger than food. It was about remembrance, acknowledgement, and healing. What began as macaroni and beans had transformed into a communion of souls living and gone. The air grew heavy with gratitude, the kind that doesn't fade with time. As the sailors talked, Melania finally spoke. Her voice was soft yet carried across the room. "I see strength in every face here tonight," she said. "But I also see the sacrifices. Families waiting. Children growing up without a parent beside them. You may not always feel seen, but tonight please know you are." The room grew still, touched by her sincerity. A few sailors wiped their eyes, surprised by how her gentle words carried more weight than any speech. Trump looked at her with pride, nodding in agreement. "She's right," he added. "You are the invisible backbone of this nation." For many, it wasn't just the president's presence, but Melania's compassion that made the night unforgettable. Her words reminded them that behind uniforms and duties, they were human beings, valued and cherished. The mess hall no longer felt like a place to eat. It felt like a sanctuary of acknowledgement and unity. Trump stood again, raising his cup of water. "To the families, wives, husbands, parents, children who stand strong while you serve. They deserve as much honor as you." The sailors raised their cups with him, repeating the toast. Sarah Lopez whispered, "Thank you," her voice trembling with gratitude. Across the hall, even the toughest veterans were moved. The President of the United States wasn't just acknowledging the troops. He was acknowledging the people who silently fought alongside them at home. In that moment, everyone felt connected, not by rank, not by power, but by shared sacrifice. Trump sat down again, smiling warmly. "You know, I've eaten in some of the world's finest dining halls. But this is better because this meal has heart." The sailors cheered, their pride swelling. The toast wasn't just a gesture. It was a bridge between worlds often divided, the homefront and the front lines. Suddenly, one of the sailors pulled out a small guitar he kept near the mess hall. "Sir, would you mind if we play something for you?" Trump nodded enthusiastically. The young man strummed a soft tune and others joined in, humming. It wasn't a military hymn or a patriotic anthem. It was a simple folk song about home, about longing and return. The lyrics drifted through the air like a gentle wave, filling the mess hall with warmth. Trump listened silently, his eyes distant, as if he too was transported to memories of his childhood and family. Melania held his hand under the table, and for the sailors, it was a rare sight, seeing their president touched in such a human way. When the song ended, Trump clapped the loudest. "That," he said with a lump in his throat, "was the best encore to a meal I've ever had." As dinner wrapped up, coffee was served. Strong, bitter Navy coffee that had a reputation of its own. Trump took a sip and instantly winced. "Wow, that could wake the dead," he joked. The sailors roared with laughter, some nodding in agreement. One shouted, "That's Navy fuel, sir." Trump held up the cup. "Well, if this is what keeps you all awake and sharp, I salute it. But I'm not sure my stomach does." Even Melania laughed softly at his playful grimace. The moment was light-hearted yet meaningful. It showed how even the most ordinary things, like a too-strong coffee, carried stories of endurance. Sailors drank it on long nights at sea, during watch shifts, and through storms. Trump raised his cup once more. "Here's to the fuel that keeps the guardians of freedom awake." Everyone cheered, their spirits lifted. Laughter once again wove itself into the fabric of the evening. As the evening drew toward its end, Trump grew serious. "You've given me more tonight than I could ever give back. But I promise you this. I will never forget this meal, this room, or the stories you've shared." His words carried weight, not as campaign promises, but as a heartfelt vow. The sailors listened intently, knowing it wasn't about politics. It was about being seen. "When I speak of strength in America, I will think of this macaroni. When I speak of sacrifice, I will remember Sarah and her husband. And when I speak of hope, I will think of every face here tonight." The hall erupted in applause, not out of obligation, but from genuine respect. Trump had come to eat with them, but he was leaving with their stories etched into his heart. For the sailors, that was worth more than any medal. The time came for the president to leave. He shook hands with every sailor, looking them in the eyes, calling some by name. When he reached Daniel, the young sailor who had doubted himself, Trump placed a hand on his shoulder. "Never forget. You're stronger than you think." Daniel nodded, tears glistening. To Sarah, he said, "Tell your husband he's got a brave wife holding the line here." She smiled, holding back tears. The sailors saluted as Trump and Melania walked toward the exit, the folded Navy flag in his hands. Before leaving, Trump turned back. This wasn't just dinner. This was America at its best. The mess hall erupted in cheers, their voices echoing like a wave. As the motorcade pulled away, the sailors remained standing, their hearts full. They hadn't just shared a meal, they had shared a moment of history, one that would live in their memories forever. Back at the White House, Trump placed the folded Navy flag on his desk. Every time he looked at it, he remembered the laughter over stale brownies, the tears during the veteran's letter, the song about home and the coffee that nearly knocked him over. But most of all, he remembered the faces, the ordinary heroes who carried extraordinary burdens. Weeks later, during a speech, Trump paused unexpectedly and said, "I once ate a Navy meal with sailors. It wasn't about the food. It was about what it represented. Sacrifice, resilience, and unity. That night, I laughed, I cried, and I learned." The audience listened, some smiling, some wiping tears. It was no longer just a story about macaroni and beans. It was a lesson about humanity. A simple meal had shown that true strength is found not in grand halls but in humble mess rooms where laughter and tears walk hand in.